on, everybody? Hope everybody's doing well today. Thank you so much for tuning in here for another episode of Tuffy Talk. We're going to be going over today kind of doing, first of all, kind of talking about the NC State women's basketball team and how they did in the NCAA tournament, but specifically, obviously, in Bridgeport, we're going to definitely talk about that UConn game, talk about kind of a review of the season overall, and kind of talk about the team for next year. And then for part two, we're going to be doing kind of some end of season awards / superlatives, things like that. So this should definitely be a fun episode. But before we get rolling, make sure, if you haven't already, make sure again, hit that subscribe button so that way you don't miss out on any new content, as well as so that way it really helps support us as well. And we really appreciate that. And also do give this video a like, please, if you don't mind, so that way the YouTube algorithm will put this video in front of more NC State fans. And also, too, if you haven't already, give us a follow at Tuffy Talk Now on Twitter and Instagram. But again, so we're going to be talking women's basketball, and obviously it's a mixed taste in my mouth in terms of how the season ended. I mean, obviously it's a bummer to lose an Elite Eight, but I know we basically I put a tweet out there saying, I mean, we won our first regular season title in over 30 years. We won our 3 straight tournament AC champions. We made it to our first Elite Eight since 1998. And I mean, so again, it's tough to be really that sorry. And also, too, I mean, we played a heck of a game against UConn. Again, we'll talk more about the UConn game, but I mean, really, it was honestly one of the best women's basketball games I've ever seen. I mean, it was really just 2 really good teams battling it out against each other. And so, I mean, it really was a great game to watch. And I mean, definitely, at the end of the day, hats off to UConn. You know, I mean, obviously they played really well. And I mean, Paige Beckers, again, we'll talk more about her, but she was dominant in the overtime, just could not miss. And, but I mean, we battled, we never quit. And, it really does say a lot about this team and a lot about Coach Moore and the team and the program that these girls have built. So Greg, since you were there in Bridgeport first, kind of give me your thoughts, your feelings in general about how the season ended and kind of looking back at the season. And then we'll kind of talk more specific from there.
Yeah. So excuse me, I got a little bit of a cold here, so I apologize, but I thought it was a great trip up there for, the state fans that made it. We showed out well. It's a long trip from Raleigh. It's a 10.5, 11-hour trip. Mm-hmm. And with everything being it is, gas prices and fuel prices for planes, we had a nice showing up there. Great environment on Saturday when we played Notre Dame. We had the Indiana fans behind us, and an occasional UConn fan would pull for us to that game, and so that was amazing with Raina and the Steel Herd around the world, and pulling that game out to launch us into the Elite Eight, and then Monday night's game, the announcers, the pro announcers, I guess, with Rebecca Lobo in the house for ESPN, said it was going to be about an 85% crowd for Connecticut. It was at least 95, I would say maybe even 96, 97. So just the fact that our ladies battled as well as they did, unfortunately one team had to lose that game, and we just came up a little short on the stick on that one.
Michael, have anything to add to
that? Just overall as a season, like you said, you started mentioning the accomplishments. It's hard to call it a disappointing season, but it's, anytime you don't make it to the national championship when you know the team had the potential to be, it's a little disappointing, but overall it was a very successful season.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, it's obviously a sour taste in my mouth for sure, just because, I mean, like, I think we talked about this during the watch party, but also before that, saying that, I mean, that the road that we would have to go through in order to win the national championship was by far the hardest of any team in NCAA tournament. And I'm talking more beating Notre Dame, beating UConn, basically an away game, then facing Stanford, then facing South Carolina. And again, I'm saying all this more than likely that's who we would have to face. And I mean, that's brutal. That is brutal. So, I mean, it's kind of one of those things that, I mean, obviously we would have loved to at least just made it to the Final Four, just to, get our second Final Four ever. But, it's kind of like, it's kind of like balancing things out, saying, hey, at the end of the day, we definitely took a step forward this season. And I think that really with any program, that's really what you want. At the end of the day, are we at a better place in this program today than we were a year ago today, and that's for any sport. And I think you could definitely say that with women's basketball that we're there.
Absolutely.
So, and I mean, because one of the things that when I was kind of looking back at the stats, one of the things that I thought was really interesting was that every single player on our team this year had at least 85 minutes of playing time. Every single player, and that person that played 85 minutes, the lowest, was Sophie Hart, our third string center. So that tells me that, I mean, you got to feel confident heading into even next season, saying that it's not like you've had players that are probably gonna get playing time that pretty much just rode the bench all season. Like, no, I mean, every single player, I mean, saw time, and I think pretty much every single player saw action in like 20 games, during the season, 20 of the 35 games. So, I mean, it's, you got to feel confident about that, and you got to feel happy about that. And also too, I mean, and one of the things that honestly I really kind of think about when I think about next season was when we played Florida State in the first game of the ACC tournament. And when they pulled the starters off and put Isaiah James, Madison Hayes, Sophie in, I mean, we were still killing it. I mean, we still looked really good. So it's kind of like, man, even our bench players were impressive. That was kind of one of the things I always think about.
The way I look at it too is, you mentioned Sophie Hart. She's our third string center, and she's a 5-star recruit.
Mhm.
Right? So, there's not a lot of teams out there that can have that luxury that your third string center is a 5-star recruit, and she's only going to get better. She's going to get more coaching, conditioning to where she can play multiple minutes, more than like probably 5 or 6 minutes a game that she was probably averaging, and she's gonna be strong in the center, and she's gonna be a great backup to Camille.
Yes.
So I look forward to that. You mentioned James; she's a great shooter. Madison Hayes can shoot the ball. We still have Jakia Brown Turner coming back for another season, and she was clutch in that game. Sending it to double overtime, hitting that 3-pointer. So it's not going to be a rebuild. It's going to be a reload.
Exactly.
We're going to probably have to dip into the portal. We're going to especially at point guard, because we're losing Reina, and we have 2 transfers that are in the portal now for point guard. So that's going to be somewhere where we're going to need to look at. But I'm confident. I mean, Wes has gotten us to this point, and I think he's only going to get better as a coach. And but the ACC is catching up though at the same point.
True. Yeah. I mean, obviously, and because a lot of the coaches now are really young, like Coach Banghart. Florida State's coach just retired. Notre Dame's coach is very young. Duke's coach is pretty much brand new. So it's getting competitive, which I mean you love. I mean, I think any NC State fan, any fan should want their conference to be competitive, and because one of the things I kind of wanted, which will kind of segue us to kind of the UConn game, is that I think it's great for women's basketball that the sport has become more competitive. Because I mean, I think we all can agree that over the last 10 to 15 years, I mean, if you were asked to fill out a women's basketball NCAA tournament bracket, everybody's going to put UConn as national champion, and then you just fill around it. I mean, it was just a given. Like, UConn's going to win it all. And this year, I mean, we were right there with them. I mean, Stanford, South Carolina's become a powerhouse. Louisville's up there. Baylor's been really good. So, I mean, it's exciting, and it's exciting for the sport, really. So,
the other thing you kind of talking about that is they had so many double-digit seeds win games this year in the NCAA tournament, and that never used to happen. So that's a testament that the game is getting so much better. Like
a lot
you
of
said,
upsets.
It was pretty much chalk. Yeah, absolutely. So you would figure everyone, the top 4 seeds would advance to the Sweet 16, and then you just keep whittling it down, and the top seeds would always advance. And so now that's not a foregone conclusion.
Yeah. And we'll go ahead and talk about this briefly here, but again, we're not going to spend too much time on it, because then Dave, I don't think that there's any more proven that the NCAA has a vendetta against any other school than NC State. It's just proven. There's just what's gone on with NC State over the last 12 months from the NCAA has just been insanity. But
I should have pulled up my tinfoil hat over here.
Exactly. So with Baylor, so for those who don't know, so basically how it worked was we were the we were the number 3 overall seed. Louisville's number 4, Baylor's number 5, UConn 6, and so obviously Baylor lost in the second round to South Dakota State by 14 points, 61-47.
Like,
and UConn made it obviously to the Final Four. Louisville's made it to the Final Four as well. So, I mean, it's kind of one of those things in the back of my mind where it's just like, it's just so proven. It basically just proved itself that UConn should have been the number 5 team. Baylor should have been number 6. We should have faced Baylor in the Elite Eight. There's just no doubt about it whatsoever. Because I think we also even said that when the selection Sunday, when selection committee came out and had UConn at 6, with Baylor losing to Texas in their conference championship game, if they would have flipped those two teams, that would have, first of all, nobody would have batted an eyelash at that, because again, Paige Beckers was coming back, and they lost only 5
UConn
games
won
without
the
Paige
conference.
Beckers, and they won the conference exactly. And and also too, because it would have helped all the issues, meaning that UConn wouldn't have been playing in Bridgeport, but also too, you could say that UConn was having a little bit an easier draw in terms of team wise. Now, obviously, because at the end of the day, obviously, that I'm assuming that's what the NCAA looks at. Now, again, I mean, with all this, I don't really even know anymore, but yeah, that's just kind of what really went through my head watching that UConn game. It's like, yeah, UConn is definitely not better than Baylor. Like, like, come on.
It's like, it didn't have, like, they didn't have to set themselves up for so much criticism. Like, they could have easily flipped Baylor and UConn, like you said, and nobody would have even noticed.
Nobody would have thought twice about it.
But yeah.
But I also thought I read something, and I could be wrong here because, you read so much and you don't know sometimes what's true and what's not true. But from what I understand is that the committee wasn't going to dork around with the top 8 teams in the AP poll. Like, they were going to pretty much leave them as is. And so based on that, that's how they came up with the idea or the criteria or whatever you want to call it. That's how they ended up seeding the way they did.
Yeah.
Now, I may be wrong, but I thought I read that somewhere.
And that makes sense. But again, it really comes down to that just like Wes Moore said, there's got to be a common sense factor. Like, use common sense.
Absolutely.
So again, it's like, well, we can avoid all of this and just put UConn, with Louisville and put Baylor with us. And then there's 0 issues. Then, I mean, there's no issues in terms of home court advantage. There's no from either side.
Yeah.
And honestly too, because I think that if I'm NC State, I would rather, whether it's neutral or not, I'd rather face Baylor than a Paige Beckers reformed UConn, So it's like, it's a matter of, you should give Louisville, who's the 4 seed, the tougher road than the 3 seed. Theoretically, you should.
Yeah.
So
the other part of that too is, and again, you can take whatever the committee said at their word, but whatever.
Yeah.
But part of it was they didn't want the student athletes to travel too much, right? So in that case, and if you're sending Baylor all the way to Connecticut and you're sending Connecticut all the way, I think what were they
Wichita.
in, Wichita?
Yeah.
Were they in the Wichita bracket? I mean, okay, whatever. But here's the thing, like, and we talked about it at some point, and I mentioned it. Seeding should not be a lifetime achievement award.
Right.
If you've truly grown the game the way that you're saying that you've grown the game, then fans will go travel wherever. And again, it's and I had a conversation with someone yesterday, and it was actually kind of interesting. The way that ESPN is in bed with UConn is insane, because most people don't realize when ESPN started programming back in the late 70s, they actually televised all of UConn's games. That was like what they were able to put on the air.
Yep.
They did high school UConn games or high school games in Connecticut, and then UConn all their sports. So that there's almost like a handshake agreement there where they're always going to take care of one another because of the lean times in the beginning. Now, you would think after 45 years of ESPN being on the air that they would be bigger than that and that would evolve, but I'm not so sure that it has.
Well, in like one scenario that's always gone through my head, which I mean, obviously, I would have rather this situation happen rather than what's actually happened, which is with Gigi Bryant, Kobe Bryant's daughter. how when Gigi passed away in the helicopter crash, it was very clear that Gigi and Kobe were diehard, huge UConn women's basketball fans, and obviously with Gigi and how talented she was, and I mean obviously with the dedication she had to the game of basketball, there was no doubt that she was going to play Division I women's basketball, and she was going to go to UConn. And holy smokes, man, like the publicity that would have gotten would have been off the daggone charts. So, but again, obviously, then I would have rather that happen than the opposite. But I'm just pointing out that it's like, the just like you said, the feed to UConn women's basketball has just been so obvious over the past couple of years. Before we continue, I want to take a quick second to tell you about our sponsor, Flightlands Jessup Insurance Group, that has your whole world covered, with agents in 5 offices throughout eastern North Carolina to help you decide how much coverage you need. Offering policies for home and auto, recreational vehicles, commercial, crop, health, life, and employee benefits. They are able to combine options to find a comprehensive solution that works for you. Flightlands Jessup protects the things you love so you can spend less time worrying and more time enjoying them. Find them on Facebook and Instagram at Flightlands Jessup. You can also visit their webpage at www.flightlandsjessup.com. So please make sure to go and check them out. Yeah. So kind of jumping to the actual game now. So, obviously taking a look back, it really just is kind of, again, a huge testament, first of all, against the team that they were able to fight back, to push through. Because I think from the watch party, one of the biggest things that I think that we kept saying, Greg, on the watch party, was that it didn't seem like necessarily they were at the team that at any point that somebody on the team was making necessarily bad decisions, like a lot of bad decisions. I mean, yeah, there were some bad mistakes here and there, but overall, generally, I mean, it was a solid game. I mean, yeah, with some travels, turnovers, things like that, but like with Notre Dame, for example, like we would do like these passes where, basically we would throw the ball over 2 defenders to try and get the ball to Kanane. It's like, it's a terrible decision. Don't do that. And I feel like that really wasn't what I was screaming this game. It was just more of just keep fighting, keep, working our way through this. UConn's going on a run. We got to, bounce back. And so, I mean, that's kind of really my first thought. I mean, so I wanted to kind of see if you agreed on it and kind of maybe add a little bit more on your side of it.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I only remember maybe 1 or 2 instances where we made some bad interior passes. I think one was Kunane trying to get it down. You know, and Coach Moore always says, "You're not a point guard," like, so let the other ones do that. Yeah. But that, and we had a couple of bad passes, but for the most part, I agree. I don't think we really turned the ball over. Some of our shot selections weren't great. We didn't shoot the ball very well, but give credit to where it's due. 1, Connecticut played great defense, and 2, the women just kept battling. Like you said, they would get down 4, 6, 8 points. I think the biggest deficit was 10, I think, if I remember correctly. But they would just fight, and in that third quarter, like with the quarter that's been our quarter all season, we got it back down. I think we were going into the fourth, I think, down 1 or 2. And then the fourth quarter was, basically even. And so, after about midway of the third quarter, that game was an even game, and it was just back and forth. It was like 2 heavyweights just slugging it out. And a couple of times, especially in the overtimes, I thought to myself, it's like, whoever has the ball last is going to win this game.
Pretty much.
It got away. It got away in the last 2.5 minutes or so, maybe 2 minutes of the second overtime. But other than that, it was just a complete slugfest. And I thought our women did really well. They weren't fazed by the crowd. It was loud. I'll give UConn that. What state fans we had, we were loud just as much. I don't know if it translated at all on the broadcast, but we made noise, and so. At the end of the day, I can't be more proud of this team, of all the adversity that they went through, having to go through the road that they had to.
Absolutely. Yeah. No. Well, I mean, it's one of the things obviously really killed us was obviously UConn had 16 points off of turnovers, and also too. I mean, you got to look at the overtime, because I think that the overtime. Because one of the things too that happened was when Jakia Brown-Turner made that shot to send it to overtime, I was like saying like that might be the dagger. That might have just sent us to the Final Four. Honestly, I thought so too. Like that would have just, in my opinion, and for most teams, just would have taken all the air out of the balloon, and I just couldn't see how UConn or any team for that matter can battle back from that when, I mean, they had it. I mean, they were up by 3,
Yeah.
you know, and so literally all they had to do was just avoid
Just hold.
any 3 and don't foul. And basically they got us to the point where we were in the far corner and Paige Beckers, challenged it well. And yet still Jakia still found a way to put it in the bottom of the net. So it was
that's the hardest 3-pointer to make too.
It was crazy.
That is like and it was coming right towards us, and I'm like, oh, that looks good. That the ball rotation. It was like watching that shot for Tiger at the Masters where the ball just slowly rolls into the hole. Like that was literally watching that. I was like, and then we're just all going crazy. Like, and to your point, I thought that was be like, okay, second overtime, they're demoralized. We got this, and unfortunately, it just didn't happen.
No. And because one of the things too because again, when I was looking back, and if I remember correctly, Paige Beckers at one point in the overtime made her first 7 shots, and I think she only had like maybe 6 or 8 points during the 4 quarters.
First half,
she made like
I think she was at 9 because I always look at the scoreboard. I think she had 9, and I think she ended up having like 18 points in the 2 overtime.
Correct.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So which is insane.
Yeah.
So because especially crazy because again, keep in mind that Paige Beckers just played, give or take, 30, 35 minutes, something like that, and then even through all that, she was able to, get herself together and still play as well as she did, and actually play way better than she even did in the first 40 minutes in overtime. It just that to me, I know we were talking beforehand, that to me is honestly what won UConn the game, was the fact that Paige Beckers was just unstoppable. And also too, obviously Aziz Fudd as well, their true freshman guard, had a ridiculous game. She only scored 19 points, but it feels like she scored 40. So
well, the points that she had were at crucial moments, right? So it's not always about the points; it's about when you score the points, and so the points sometimes feel bigger than they really are.
Yeah.
I thought Cunane did a great. I mean, we didn't get into foul trouble at all until about the first overtime. I think the only one that really got into any kind of foul trouble was Kayla Jones. I think she got to like 4.
Yeah.
But Cunane did a great job. For the most part, we held their bigs in check. Again, I thought they kind of took liberties with Cunane at times, and that they weren't always called.
Yep.
And we kind of talked about it beforehand. Like you can say whatever you want to say about the refs. At the end of the day, we had a chance to win, so you can't blame it on the refs. But there were calls where you thought they should have gone.
Were terrible,
your way. But we shot more free throws than they did, if my memory is correct. It was significant in that regard.
Yeah, I did see that.
Yeah, we shot
overall.
So you can't really complain about the fouls.
Well, we actually
overall,
shot 19. They shot 20, so it was about the same.
Okay, so they must have caught.
It was in the last.
They must have caught him in the overtime.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Michael.
In the last 2 overtimes, it was like 10. It was like 10-2 or something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah,
but
we were doing a lot of fouling. Unfortunately, it was Paige Beckers that and that was another thing I don't understand. And I'm never going to question Coach Moore because he knows a lot more than I ever will know. But on a couple of those inbound passes, and I don't remember UConn's names, but number 20, she shot like 0 for 6 or 7 from the free throw line, and I'm not sure why we didn't bump her with the inbound passes and send her to the line instead of like a Paige Beckers. Again, I'm nitpicking, and maybe we tried, and that was the other thing too. We were trying to foul, and the refs weren't calling it.
Right.
They ran off some time, and I think what was about 12 or 14 seconds we were trying to foul, and it got down, and then it got down to like 6 or 7 seconds, and we were down by 4 or 5
at that point.
So, but yeah, it was an interesting. I don't know why they weren't calling.
No.
They didn't have a problem at points to blow the whistle, but when we needed them to, they didn't.
Yeah,
but
kidding.
Yeah, I mean, overall though, it really felt like a very evenly matched game. Even when UConn went up in the first half, 7 or 8 points, it was like, okay, we were making, like we talked about, a couple bad passes, a couple bad turnovers, and it was like, okay, you clean that up and we'll be fine. Like and that's what happened. Got back into it, and then Paige Beckers. I mean, there's a reason she's the number 1 basketball player in the country.
Yeah, I think if she wasn't injured this year, she'd been right there for Player of the Year.
Sure.
I think she was Player of the Year last year, wasn't she?
Yeah.
If my memory
Yeah,
serves
she
me.
was. She was Natural Player of the Year.
Well, Yeah, and I don't know if they showed some of the like when I would see her, like she'd like do those little curl jumpers, like she'd right around the key, right around the free throw line. She just, I mean, that was like her
automatic.
sweet spot,
Yep.
and she'd curl off a screen and just pop it, and she even did like the whole Jordan thing, like and then, but I was kind of the one thing that I wish we had an answer for. Like Kai did a great job in the first 3 quarters, but for whatever reason, we didn't have an answer for her, and in those last 2 periods with the overtimes, and you give her space and time, she's going to make you pay.
Well, and one last name I want to bring up, which was a disappointment. Not necessarily like when I say disappointment, I'm not saying like I'm upset at her that she didn't have her best game, but it's more of like she's a senior. I wish that her last game could have been a better performing one. And you got to talk about Reina Perez. Now, I say that she had 10 assists, which is great. But she shot 1 for 8 from the field, 1 for 5 from 3, and she had 1 steal, 3 points. So, obviously for Reina and for what we usually expect from her, being a very consistent player, you definitely look at that and you think, man, if we could have gotten her to 50%, like give us an extra 6 points, then I mean that could have been a huge difference maker. And but also too, and we'll talk a little bit more in the next part, but Diamond Johnson was a huge, I think, momentum factor for what kept us or what got us back into the game against UConn. So, but
I like to call her the little engine that could.
Yeah.
I mean, she is a spark plug, and the game changes when she's on the court. I almost said field, but on the court. The tempo changes. Everything, just the dynamics completely changes. I mean, that's the one thing I really liked, the Perez and Johnson connection.
It was great.
They really were the yin to the yang.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they were very, very complimentary of one another.
Yes.
I agree with that 100%. I think, and the future is bright. I mean, she's only going to get better, with more minutes and so on and so forth. But the last point I will make about Reina, and for the most part, we didn't shoot the ball very well in either game up in Bridgeport from 3, with the exception of Jakia. Kai had a couple, but other than that, I was really surprised that Cunane didn't. I don't think she took 1 3-pointer. Maybe she took
didn't.
1 during in either of the games, and that was the one thing. Like, she had space to take a couple, and I think that would have maybe loosened up some of the defense in those games had she maybe hit 1 or 2 early in the game, and that was something that she did quite often during the season. And I think she shot like 40% from 3-point range this season. So, and again, I don't know, if that was, intentional not to have her shoot, but that would have been something that would have been nice to maybe see.
It seemed like it for sure. It seemed like it, but it's it's who knows at this point. So, but thank you all so much again for tuning in for part 1 here. Hope you all enjoyed this conversation so far. Again, make sure to tune in with us for part 2, where again we're going to be kind of handing out some end of season awards, superlatives, kind of things, and kind of looking at the season overall more. But make sure again, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out whenever we release new NC State content, and also too, whenever we have any live streams, watch parties, things like that. Give this video a like so that way the YouTube will put this video in front of more NC State fans, and also to give us a follow, Tuffy Talk Now on Twitter and Instagram. But thank you all so much for joining us for part 1, and we'll see you for part 2. As always, go Pack.